Hello world, this is Shruti Pandey, and today I have with me somebody who I met during the pandemic on the fad that was happening that time called as Clubhouse. And I'm so grateful that thanks to that app, I got to meet some of the most amazing, not just humans, but personas like the one I have today with me, Dr. Carlos. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving me your time today. It means a lot.
You're very welcome. I'm always open for emergent conversations.
I understand you've been keeping really busy. It seems so. In fact, I remember you as a very, very bubbly person the last time we spoke. So I'm just simply going to jump on the three questions that I've created myself for you. Is that okay? Should we start off with?
Perfectly happy with that. Of course, go for it.
All right, all right. So my first question for you is, you're a PhD in atomic physics. How did that happen? Like, what does that even mean for commoners like us? Like, how did that really happen for you?
Oh, wow, there's a lot. So there's what it means and then how it happened. I'll start with how it happened. It was purely by accident, to be honest. I would say serendipity. I did a degree in physics, of course. I studied physics with Italian, of all things. A nice, interesting combination. Um, Thankfully, there's at the time the University of Sussex offered these kind of combination degrees where you could do an arts and science degree at the same time or combination, which I really like the idea of. Like I wasn't keen on purely studying one topic, and I'm half Italian, and with doing a degree you in Italian and with the physics in Italian, you get to spend a year abroad. So it had the combined benefit of extending my university time, so I didn't have to go to work straight away, as well as spending a year in Italy, living the Italian life and being a student in a foreign country. So following that, um, I was approached by my supervisor, who was supervising my final year project, and asked me if I was interested in doing a PhD. At the time, I didn't have a clear idea of what I was going to do next. I was open to anything, so I came back to Sussex Uni and I had a look around at his lab, and he was in the field of solid state physics. For those of you who don't understand that, it's really how matter works, and particularly around, you maybe think about how do people make electronic chips, and how do all of these kind of microprocessors work, and basically to make them work you have to understand solid state physics, this physics of solid things. Wasn't particularly interesting for me. However, at the same time, a laboratory had been opened on the Sussex Uni by a group who had come over from Harvard, and they were doing some work on atom optics, which is the idea of how to manipulate atoms as if they were waves of light. So for some people who are maybe familiar with this, it's to do with the quantum nature of matter and this idea of wave particle duality, where when you get to the universe of very small things, i.e., individual atoms, they don't necessarily behave in the same way that everyday physics works. A ball does, or the analogy we used to use was snooker. So if you think of a snooker table
Yeah.
or pool table, and you have a ball, and you hit the ball, you know exactly where it's going to go. It's going to follow a line, it's going to rebound off a cushion, and it will go somewhere else. When you have an atomic size, or atom-sized snooker table, when it's so small, and you think of an atom as a little ball, you could hit the ball, but you would never know exactly where it's going to go. Or you wouldn't, if you knew exactly the speed and direction it was going to go, you wouldn't know exactly where it would be. Or if you knew exactly where it was, you wouldn't know in which direction it would go next. So just crazy mad stuff. But the way you can manipulate particles of that size is thinking of them as waves of light. And so that was fascinating. And fundamentally, it was spent me. My work was about sitting in a dark room, making atoms bounce. Because what we were trying to do is create a mirror for atoms. So if you think of a mirror for light, we were trying to do the same thing for a mirror for atoms. And we were trying to, in some laboratories, they were using massive high-powered lasers that cost ridiculous amounts of money. We were using videotape and recording uh, different audio signals onto that tape to make a mirror. And we were using lasers that we got out of a CD player. And so we were just like hacking things together to test some fundamental laws of physics, which sounded fun. So I thought I'd go on and do it. I had nothing else to do. And so I spent 3 years studying atomic physics, which was essentially bouncing atoms off videotape.
With all due respect to the common folks and to yourself, like nobody just chooses atomic physics because they didn't feel like they didn't have anything else to do. I think it takes a lot of courage to even attempt sitting in that dark room and bouncing atoms off. Like this is crazy, and in a good way, in such a good way. I mean, when you're telling me a story a couple of times, I was remembering that episode from The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon is trying to teach Penny something, and she's like, "Oh, but what if it's a wave?" And then everybody's like, "Oh my God, how did Penny decipher that?" I hope people decipher it the same way after listening to you and this amazing introduction about atomic physics. Which leads me to my second question, which I have for you is, so you're a doctor, that too in atomic physics. So I understand that that happened because you didn't had anything else to do. But how did happy start of school happen from that? Like from being a doctor, being a doctorate in atomic physics, how did you again switch to something this opposite and crazy? And yeah, you may want to add the adjectives yourself. How did happy start of school happen?
Incongruent, maybe a word you could use. It's like, how do you go to coaching people about creating businesses that feel effortless and meaningful from a place of bouncing atoms in a lab off a videotape? Yeah, I could definitely say that it's not an obvious path. And I would say the thread that runs through all of my story is serendipity. Following my nose, not really knowing exactly where I wanted to be or where I wanted to go, or actually correcting that, having a notion of what I should be doing in terms of getting a respectful career and or respectable career, earning enough money to buy my own house, having a family, getting married, etc., etc. All the tick boxes that people consider a successful life to contain. But ultimately, deep down, I didn't have a clear vision as to what I wanted to do in the future. I had a feeling that it had to do with answering interesting, big questions. It had to be something around learning. It had to be, for a while, personally challenging. I felt that was important in order for me to feel fulfilled. I needed to challenge myself intellectually. I always needed to feel the need of progress and growth, personal growth particularly. And I needed to be connected to people. I needed to feel like I was connected in the sense socially, but also connected in the sense that I was making some kind of difference in the world. And so the reason I left physics was, um, at a social level, it can be quite a solitary life as an academic. And there's, academia, that you have lots of other academics that you connect with, but trying not to be too judgmental around it. I felt those kind of relationships are a bit one-dimensional, or just very intense. And I also like having fun. I also like being a fool, and I enjoy the silly things in life. And I wasn't necessarily getting that as much in physics. There was an element of money questions, like atomic physics. Physics in general is not a particularly well-funded um, field.
Well funded
It's a
physics.
very Yeah, it's not, there's unless you're in very large labs doing maybe particle physics, but most of the time the money is where there is an application, where there's some kind of financial outcome. That's where money usually finds itself. I was interested in the deeper questions around, you know, reality and physics, and on one hand it was fascinating from that, just understanding the nature of reality, but in the context of science it's very much based around maths. It's around kind of really understanding very complex models. It can be very unattached to the real world in inverted commas, and I put on those quotation marks because it's quite a abstract way of thinking. Just even think about the atomic world, and quantum mechanics has no bearing or relationship to an everyday experience. So it can be isolating when you're working in that area. Not many people understand what you're talking about or can really engage in a conversation. So it can feel quite one way. Or you have to, without being condescending, dumb down in a certain level, because you have to, because of it's so based on intricate mathematics, you can't necessarily explain it in its true sense in layman's terms. So the upshot being is it's an isolating way of living and working. That wasn't something that met my needs for connection. Um, the other aspect, again, like I said, with the money, it's like I felt I needed to be able to earn a certain amount of money in order to be successful, and I wasn't going to do that in physics. But at the same time, it wasn't something I could apply all of that knowledge in the financial sector, and other kind of more, particularly the financial sector, financial modeling, anything to do with maths and business usually ends up to do with money, and you can make a lot of money in that world. I didn't feel that that was somewhere that I could also potentially thrive, because it wasn't something that I felt it was. The phrase in my head, the story in my head, is that it was a place where my soul would die slowly. So didn't, I wasn't attracted. I was very aware that it wasn't something that had any longevity for me. And so through accident, my girlfriend at the time, now wife, her best friend was working in a web design agency, and she invited me to a party. I went to the party. It was in a beautiful, cool Soho studio in the middle of London. It was hip hop playing in the background, people smoking weed, people programming, a bit drinking, and it was just such a chilled atmosphere. And I got talking to the owner. She asked me if I wanted the job. I said, why not? Didn't have anything better to do. And so I did that. It met my need for learning, because I had to teach myself programming from scratch. And I ended up becoming a director in the company, and realized actually I didn't see my future in that place and doing that kind of work. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do next. And my old school friend, one of my best friends, Lawrence, who's my now business partner, he was a designer. He needed help with some of the technical aspects of his work. So I said, I quite like the freedom of being a freelancer. So I quit my job, became a freelancer, and I collaborated with him. We then set up our own web design agency. I'm going to speed up the story now. We spent a good 6 years working together, and at some point, Lawrence lost the love of designing stuff for other people. He was really interested in the science of happiness. We were working a lot with entrepreneurs and startups. We felt the need to teach them how to actually do startup well, which is really understanding what people really want and also what you want. We thought we needed a school for startups to teach our clients how to think about building businesses and products in kind of very uncertain, creative ways. So we needed a startup school, but for us, happiness was key to it. So one day I sent him an email, said, why don't we create something called the Happy Startup School? He then took those 3 words and then created a website, created a manifesto, shared it with the world. And within 3 to 6 months, we had 1,000 people signed up to our manifesto. So that was a strong indication that there was something here. Forward wind a couple of years, and we thought actually we didn't see a future in the agency, or Lawrence didn't see his own future in the agency. I didn't see a future running an agency on my own. So we just shut down the business, didn't sell it, ended up telling our clients that we were going to do something new, ended up giving all of our staff to one of our existing clients, and we pared down and just started the Happy Startup School. And it started off as a way of teaching entrepreneurship, lean startup, and also kind of the science of happiness and how happiness and company culture good, positive company culture go hand in hand. And over the past 10 years, it's evolved into coaching programs, retreats to the Alps and India and the US, our yearly Happy Startup Summer Camp Festival, and online community.
Story, I'm not sure if you're planning of writing a book ever, but I think you do. I hope you do someday, because it's such a amazing amalgamation of maybe atomic physics in some way, because it's like literally all the opposites accidentally meeting in your story. Like this Italian, learning Italian on one side, mixing it with physics, then having this happy accident of getting to some place with your girlfriend who's now your wife, and then working with a friend who, like this is crazy. And this is that's what I think, you just have a lot of good karma is what I would call it, if you understand that term. Because this is such a good touch wood, such a good life. And I mean, I was just trying to feel a lot of things while you were saying this, because when you are on that hero's journey, if I may say, when you're like, I know I can do this, and I know I can do this with all the perfection in the world, but I don't find my soul in this. How do you bring back your compass to that north star or something? Like how did you know that you were on the right path when you were, like, I'm not sure if you were lost, but did you ever feel like that, I'm lost and I know this is not the right thing for me, but how would I get where I want to be, something like that? Did that ever happen with you? Because I think it happens with me a lot.
Yeah, no, I think you're very perceptive around that. There was a period that I would say I was lost, unsure about what next, not really knowing exactly what I wanted. And what I did know, and I think it's interesting you say this now, reflecting on this, as someone I know talks to me about limits and boundaries and how they influence our choices. And reflecting on that, I had a real strong sense of my limit and my boundary when it came to working hard to make money. Um, I had a judgment that I was just lazy. I didn't like working hard. To be honest, I don't think I've ever worked really hard. It doesn't feel like I've worked really hard. I'm a pretty intelligent person. I sometimes judge myself that I could have used that intelligence for much more impact. But I also love the idea of, like, why do I need to do things a hard way in order to make something happen when I
Nice.
can just turn up, do something, and it's helpful. And it was just trying to find out what was that me-shaped space in the world, in the puzzle that is the universe, that I could just fit into without having to change myself in any way. And I would say the story for me personally, anyway, was just waiting. I think just waiting and just trying things out and seeing what fit. For a while, I thought being a programmer, a developer, technical architect, someone who knew technology um, was my space, or my little the shape that I was supposed to take up. But I realized it wasn't energizing. It did drain me. While I was very good at it and I could, solve very complex technical problems and build software, I didn't. I was. I. I. I would need to recover after that. But I didn't know what it was what would give me lots of energy, and maybe that's one of the things I would have done differently, is explored a bit more what those things were a bit more consciously. But the where I find myself now with one-to-one coaching, group coaching, having conversations like this with you, Shruti, thinking about how we align. Well, thinking about this journey of self knowledge, self awareness, and how that impacts the choices we make in the world and how we can be of service, what happiness actually means in terms of not something that we seek, but something that we always have. That's something I'm very curious about, and how we can come from, work from a position of peace to then make products and create profits and do something purposeful in the world rather than making money and trying to do good in order to be happy. So that for me lights me up. And that's only through serendipity and only through letting go of what I think I should be doing, and that sometimes just following other people before I actually had any clarity. That's been my journey of feeling, um, finding the path of least resistance to where I need to be.
The fact that you use the word soul a couple of times in this conversation is making me realize that that's probably the similarity between us, which is why for all these months or time that I got to know you, we've still kept in touch in a way or so, because I think there has to be something similar, right? And it's not just about purpose, but like you rightly mentioned, doing something for not just for the heck of it, for the money part. Yes, we all need to sustain and survive, but about maybe a calling or a passion or something more than just making money, which makes sense. And which brings me to the last question that I have for you, which is, why do humans suppress the feel aspect in their lives, and especially at workplaces?
Sorry, could you repeat that question? Why do
Why
humans
do
express
humans
the?
suppress? Why do humans suppress the feel aspect in their lives, and especially at workplaces?
Okay, so I'm interpreting that is as, why do humans not express their real emotions, what's going on for them,
Yeah,
authentic, or what's really going on for them
maybe if I can give you an
generally, and
example,
particularly at work?
maybe if I can give you an example to this, something like very naive one, like if a man would try to, I don't know, if he gets a little emotional at workplace, he would be judged, right? Like, oh my God, he's getting all senti and sobby and stuff like that. And on the contrary, if a woman is trying to, or if she gets a little emotional or cries, it's like, oh, you're being a girl, why are you crying and stuff like that. So why is this whole gamut of expressing ourselves so suppressed in human lives, and especially at workplaces?
Mm.
That makes sense.
So, yes, well, I have a theory, or some theories, some loose ideas around it, and I think it's a very complex topic. I'll make a kind of a simplistic argument for my thinking. The world of work, up until very recently, and still quite, I think, um, fundamentally so, is around delivering consistent value, um, whether there's value to the customer or value to the shareholder. But it's about having a process uh, that people can rely on, in inverted commas, whether that's your lights switching on, the buses being on time, someone being able to serve you in the supermarket, or finding the right clothes in the shop. You know, we are very, well, at least in the world I live in now, very reliant. We take for granted that things are there when we need them, which means those systems and processes need to be very consistent. And the one thing that I have discovered about humans and their emotions is they're not always consistent. We can have very challenging feelings and difficulties that turn up and manifest themselves in very um, unexpected ways, due to a lack of self-awareness, but also due to our own environments and the way we've been brought up, and the interactions that we have. And to kind of fix them or heal them is not necessarily done in a short amount of time. So if you're in a meeting and you're really upset about something that someone said, and everything has to stop, or you can't continue because you're feeling really um, drained, or emotional, or sad, or angry, or whatever it is, to deal with that takes compassion, time, attention, and also not knowing how long it's going to take for you to resolve it, because it could be quite a deep and painful wound, or it could be just a temporary thing. But not knowing is not congruent with a consistent money making machine that is a business. And so if we have an expectation that time is money, we can't waste time on things that aren't making money, then someone's emotional breakdown is wastage. It's not helping the business. Um, so if I look at it in that very simplistic way, the factory system, which needs to churn out consistently product,
Yeah.
and the emotional system, which is up and down in all sorts of ways and sometimes breaks down, those two systems don't necessarily work together all the time well. And so we try and shoehorn the human system into the factory system, which then means the human system gets squashed.
So does this mean that what we have been going through or seeing through all the time, that as human resources, we are just meant to be used, abused, or exploited, and that's the way it will be? Or is there any hope? Because this complexity isn't making sense in the new generation that we are in, right?
I think I don't have any kind of answers around it. I think the most important thing is an awareness. And if we're aware of what the problem is, then we will find the answers. I think when we start to make judgments of, oh, the industrial model is wrong, and the way businesses and cultures and businesses is wrong, and all, yes, it's not pleasant for human beings, but without some of these systems and processes, some of us wouldn't have the luxury to even talk like this. Is the nuance in all of this? So yes, I think we need to become more aware of the fact that, particularly knowledge economies, the mental performance of the people within the business is key to the value of the business. But if we're just driven by the monetary value of the business, then we're still going to be hacking the human beings in order for them to be more productive. I think deeper down, without below the surface of business and, in a sense, money capitalist system, there's a deeper question as to why are we doing what we're doing? What is it that success means for us? How is it that we feel? What do we feel is important in terms of how the world should evolve? And how do we deal with these kind of very complex, sometimes opposing needs? And I don't know. I'm not very much. I'm not revolutionary. I'm not saying, oh, just scrap. Destroy the machines, kill the computers because they're destroying our lives.
Right.
I'm more of a, let's understand ourselves a bit more, and then see how can we use what we built to serve us more as humans. But what does it mean to be human?
I don't know about others, but you really gave me a lot of food for thought and points for introspection with respect to where my life is taking me, my direction, and the awareness aspect that you just spoke of right now. Uh, but this session really means a lot to me, and thank you so much, Carlos, for giving me your time. If you have any parting thoughts that you might want to, you may please go ahead.
Oof. I think I'm grateful for this conversation. Thank you very much, Shruti. It's always, I find it always useful and energizing to be given space for my mind to wander. The thing that I'm most curious about at the moment is how we cultivate more of a sense of peace in ourselves, so that then we can meet the chaos of life and other people in a more grounded way, where we're not suddenly reacting or being triggered, etc., 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 but able to work more powerfully and skillfully with challenging situations and complexity. So that we're not striving to be better or do better. We're kind of responding to what the world needs, what's going on in ways that we can, and sometimes we can't do anything, and trying to do something when we can't is not a necessarily useful way to be. So I think in terms of parting words is like the question is how can we cultivate more peace in our lives, and what does that mean? That's the question that I'm having anyway.
Ironically, that's the question even I have on my mind. So it looks like maybe, in case time permits, we'll have future follow-ups, or maybe I'll have some calls with you and make this more understanding for myself. But thank you so much once again, Carlos, for giving me your time. This really means a lot. And I hope someone finds this insightful and makes the most out of this conversation. So thank you so much again.
Well, thank you. I am very grateful for your really interesting questions and how they've allowed me to, yeah, reflect a bit more on my own thoughts.
I didn't mean to do that, but I'm glad if that was a good thing for you to do. So thank you.
Thank you.